Every episode ranked of Spongebob SquarePants Season 1. This is just my opinion, and yeah. Number 41 is I Was a Teenage Kid. This episode is just weird. The snail plasma, if it gets into someone inside, it will just turn them into a snail, which is weird. This episode isn't that creepy, but it also is kind of bland and boring in plot. Number 40 is Falls in April. This episode is not that good. First of all, it's not funny. Squidward is kind of... Squidward, he spends the whole entire episode apologizing to SpongeBob, and it's kind of boring and it's memorable, but that's the only memorable part is the first part. Number 39 is Hall Monitor. This is Puff gets arrested at the end and I don't like it. This episode is kind of boring and there were some funny scenes, but other than that, it doesn't really have much going for it. Number 38 is The Paper. This episode is unfair to Squidward because when Squidward does stuff with the paper, it doesn't work. When SpongeBob does it, it does work, and the ending is fine. It's not as bad, but it is one of the worst parts of the episode. This episode's not funny. Number 37 is Nature Pants. This episode has no jokes and it's kind of boring, but yeah, it doesn't really have much going for it, other than the fact that it's not really funny, and SpongeBob is also doesn't fit with the jellyfish, but the end is very good. Number 36 is Sandy's Rocket. This episode does not have that much memorable stuff, and I was very bored, and it feels unfinished, but it is funny and it's also kind of entertaining at the same time, even though boring parts. Number 35 is Reef Blower. This episode is very short and has no dialogue. It's just fine. Number, I think 34 is Bubble Sand. This episode is kind of boring and it doesn't really have a lot of artwork, but it's very funny and creative, but the ending is a kind of cliche. Number 33 is Jolly Fishing. This episode is a Squidward torture episode, but it's also funny. The Squidward torture minuses from it. At least SpongeBob and Patrick would kind of do something good. And the I will go the other way gag was kind of funny. Number 32 is Muscle Buff Pants. This episode is a classic and it's very entertaining, but the face that Sandy makes when she realizes that SpongeBob has a fake anchor arm is I don't like it. This episode is funny, but it's below average in comedy, but yeah, the chaperone also has one of the worst endings in this season. Number 30 is Rock Bottom. This episode is not that interesting. SpongeBob remains in the same place through most of the episode, but I completely forgot what I was going to say next. Number 29 is Valentine's Day. This episode plays very rarely, and it is also kind of funny. But Patrick wreaks havoc on the place, which is a minus, but it's very funny, so it's at least good. This would have been a perfect episode with no flaws, but the squeaky boots in this episode might minus it down because I don't really like high-pitched sounds. It's not really that it's loud, it's not that annoying either, but it's just no. Number 27 is Plankton. This episode, everything in it is good. Why is it not higher? Because it's good, not great, just good. Great debut to Plankton. But the scene where SpongeBob has to find Plankton is very slow. Number 26 is Jellyfish Gym. Same as the last one. Everything in this episode is good. There's like one great quality. It's very entertaining, but other than that, it's just good. Number 25 is Free at the Tree Dome. There's not much jokes in it, but it's very high because of jokes. Help Wanted comes at 24 because it has continuity. It's just not developed as much and it's not as funny. The mommy joke was amazing. Number 23 is Hooky. This episode would have been okay if it wasn't for the very good the Patrick turning into tuna fish. I think it's very weird and random. Number 22 is Opposite Day. The beginning with Patrick is the best part, and the Squidward's part, where the real slate really comes in and meets all the Squidwards, is very kind of funny. It's good. Number 21 is Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost. Everything but the ending is funny and good. Naughty Nautical Neighbors is number 20. This is halfway. Also, this is an episode with no flaws. It's just good. It's not great. It's just good. That's not really a flaw. But there is kind of a flaw. The ending where Squidward breaks his back. Number 19 is Scary Pants. I agree with peer reviews on this one that it should be special. Also, this episode felt kind of short in general. I could easily sum it up. Number 18 is SP129. This episode is very weird, but it doesn't compete with the rest of the pack. It's still very amazing, good. Oh, Karate Choppers is number 17. It has such an amazing plot. It is very creative, just like the last one. Number 16 is Texas. This episode is very funny and has lots of jokes, and it also is very funny and it has the Patrick line at the end. I know it's funny. Number 15 is Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 2. This is our last good episode before the great. This episode isn't as good as the first one, but it's still good. And I have nothing else to say. This is a great episode with one flaw, that Patrick is trying to be a doctor, and it's fake. Number 13 is Walking Small. This episode has a very good appearance for Plankton. This episode, Walking Small, also is a very original plot that hasn't really been remixed that much, even though the abrasive side coming up in season 7 is also Patrick teaching SpongeBob to be, abrasive. And this episode, Walking Small, is funny. It's not as funny as the abrasive side, but we'll get into that. It's not that entertaining either. It's just very creative. And it's the only episode that is the most memorable ever. Number 12 is Sleepy Time. I just really like Gary's dream in this episode. It explores all of the dreams of every single character, and it's actually kind of funny. There's not really any dull moments. So yeah, pretty good episode, amazing. Number 11 is Arg. This episode is so... Mr. Krabs gets the funniest punishment ever. He gets plastic doubloons and it's very funny, and the Flying Dutchman appears in this episode. It's very funny. It's a lot better than Shanghai, which is a spoiler. I just love it. It has no bad qualities also. Least of that, we have number 10 is Culture Shock. This episode is very fun diving into, and it shows that the character's talents, but there is one minor problem, that everyone does not like it when Squidward comes in. But other than that, everyone is likable and everything is just amazing. And it has this feel that bumps it all the way up to number 10. Number 9 is Fun. This episode does a great job of showing what Plankton could be, even though he does go back to being a villain at the end, which was predictable. But this is just such a good episode. It's super funny and entertaining. And wow, the song is so good. Number 8 is Pizza Delivery. This episode it's a bit more boring than the others, but wow, the story is amazing, and Squidward and SpongeBob bounce off each other pretty well. Squidward has pessimism and SpongeBob has optimism, and it's very cool. Oh, my aching tentacles. Number 7 is Home Sweet Pineapple. This episode is not that memorable, but it's so funny. The spider part was funny, then the ending was amazing. Number 6 is Pixels. The only way this is high is because of the introduction of Bubble Bass, and Mr. Krabs helps SpongeBob in this episode, which is rarer. Number 5 is the original Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. This one is actually very funny and entertaining. It has a lot of jokes in SpongeBob and Patrick trying, like Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy think they're villains, and it's kind of funny. Really funny. Number 4 is Ripped Pants. SpongeBob learns a lesson in this episode, and the song at the end is amazing. But it doesn't really get much better from here. The number 1 is better, but not by much at all. Number 3 is Neptune's spatula. I love the Patrick face on his pants, and they don't fix it in the episode. And the introduction to Neptune is very special, and this episode is not like any other episode where Neptune is mean. This is nice Neptune. Number 2 is Boarding Soul. I loved how funny this episode was. It's the funniest in the whole entire season. Funnier than number 1. It has a very good introduction to Mrs. Puff. It also has a lot of funny jokes. SpongeBob with his antenna. How did Mrs. Puff know? And then I really wanted Mrs. Puff to win when SpongeBob said he was cheating and Mrs. Puff said it was fine. I think that was funny. And this is an amazing episode. It's a tiny pinch, not as good as the first place. Number 1 is Employee of the Month. I never seen an episode where SpongeBob and Squidward compete. This episode has... I just wanted to know who would win at the end, and it turned out it was neither of them. They also wreck the restaurant and they go crazy. And at the very end, there's this funny thing where SpongeBob and Squidward are right next to Mr. Krabs, and then they say, who is gonna be Employee of the Month? And I love the competitive nature. It's amazing. Squidward, I just wanted Squidward to win, actually. I want SpongeBob to lose for once, but whatever, that's the end. That's number 1. Now let's go on with the seasonal rating. In my opinion, season 1 of SpongeBob SquarePants is actually a good season. It is the worst of the pre-movie seasons, though, that's a spoiler. But it does have the most good episodes out of the pre-movie seasons. It's probably because the first episodes were not as developed as in comedy nor plot or anything. So yeah. Here are the numbers. And here is the pie chart. Bye guys, I will see you in the next video if season 2 of SpongeBob ranked from worst to best.